Thank you for asking me to speak about my project Hope Against Hope, Vignettes of the Unsheltered. I'd also like to thank the guests of Friendship Park for sharing their life stories with me and allowing me to make their portraits. This project came about when a friend of mine, Bob Red, asked me if I would take photographs of the staff of Loaves and Fishes and some of the guests of Friendship Park for Father's Day. The photographs would be printed and the prints shared and sent to family members. Luckily, my schedule lined up and I was able to make the portraits that day. When going back through the images I photographed that day, my wife asked if all the people she saw on the monitor were homeless. Most of them, I said. Before making the photographs, I decided the images should be made in black and white, not color. And by choosing to make the portraits in black and white and treating my digital camera as if it were a film camera, removing all color choices, placing everyone equally in the same light with the same background, coupled with the absence of visual cues the guests carry with them, humanity emerged over homelessness. Judgment and stereotype fell away and disappeared. This left me asking myself, what does an unsheltered person look like? The portrait session was successful, and I asked Hannah, the director of Friendship Park, if I could come back each month and make more portraits for the guests and give them prints, and she said yes. I'd been working on this project for about 6 months when a colleague asked me if I felt out of place or different, or if I felt like I didn't fit in at all when I photographed the guests at Friendship Park. No, I said. When I look into the eyes of the guests I photograph, I see myself, and I see the face of a brother I never had, or a sister, or a father, or a mother, and most of all, sometimes, I see a friend. But what I'm really seeing is family, an extended family that lives and loves and loses just like everyone else, just like you and me. I had not thought about it until then, but we're all connected. We're all connected through kindness and chaos. For each monthly portrait session, I set up in the calm and tranquility of the shelter's library. In the solitude and stillness of the library, guests become more introspective. While photographing their portraits, they sometimes disclose things so shocking and heartbreaking that it's difficult not to stop for a moment and not to wonder how my life veered so differently from theirs. As the guests reveal their stories to me, their experiences are etched onto my purpose. Women who experience domestic violence are unable to return to the home in which they live with their children. They are asked not to return home and go to a family member's house. But what if you don't have a family to go to? What if you're all alone? Sometimes you have to go to the street. I've met guests who are living on the street after being told they have a terminal illness or just days after undergoing a major surgery. When this portrait was made of Natalia, she was unsheltered and still recovering from the side effects of brain surgery. Natalia's entire stay in the hospital was 4 to 5 days for brain surgery and recovery. With pain meds in hand, hundreds of stitches still fresh above her right eye, Natalia and her husband left the hospital and set out to find shelter. They located a safe place under a bridge that provided both a barrier from the elements and protection from others who might be tempted to steal their valuable pain medication. Hospitals do not extend recovery for unsheltered patients like Natalia or transfer them to other respite or care facilities. More often than not, unsheltered patients are discharged to the street to recover from surgery, cancer treatment, and other serious health conditions. This is Eldon. Eldon is unsheltered and battling lung cancer. Guests like Eldon leave an undeniable impression on me. A few weeks before we met and I made this portrait, he was robbed of everything he owned. As I talked to Eldon, he pointed across the room to a small bindle nestled between the bookshelves in the library. There's my house. That rolling suitcase, that's my world, or what's left of it. Last year, I saw Eldon and I waved to him. He put his hand up as he rounded the corner and entered the rain-soaked parking lot. He had a newly acquired bike, cart, and rolling suitcase. They were all moving slowly and steadily to win a race that is yet to be won. Most of the guests I photograph don't share their stories with me. I do not fact-check the stories the guests tell me. It's impossible. And I'm not a reporter. I'm an artist, and I take the guests at their word, and I accept their truth without judgment. During the portrait session, it's difficult to fully interview and talk with everyone. Sometimes there's a line of 3 or 4 people who are waiting for their portrait to be made. When a guest allows me to see into their past and current life, I don't want to rush them through the process. I like to sit down with them, and I like to take our time together. To get follow-up interviews, I'll go back to Friendship Park and I sit and look and wait for someone I have photographed in the past. Sometimes we walk and talk, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes there's just a nod of acknowledgement. I was in Friendship Park with my friend Bob, and he was shooting portraits of the guests. I saw one of the people I had photographed, and he came over, and we started talking. And after a few minutes, he said, "I gave the photo you made of me to my dad. I hadn't seen him in 15 years. That's when everything changed for me. The photograph is a tangible object, not sent through a text message or an Instagram post or shared on Facebook with a goofy thumbs up icon or Snapchatted with Bambi filters over the face. Sharing a photograph of yourself with another person is real life. The paper, the feel of it in your fingers and in your hand is real. It's right in front of you. No one is self-made. Every decision and circumstance you've made or encountered in your life has led you here today, to this room, to the place where you're sitting. Think about it. Who helped you along the way to get you where you are today? What does your support system look like? What does your family look like? The project has changed and evolved since the Father's Day session. As I come to know more about the guests and live with their portraits, I decided to make the images more representative of our experiences. Amending the portrait and including another frame from our photo session, this amended portrait gives each subject a reflection of dignified individuality, bound with a sense of movement, altering perception, and the occurrence of a larger, more complex moment in each life lived. My goal is through listening to the guests and their stories and trying to understand their stories, so I can capture a moment or moments that clearly communicate with the viewer of the image, a new visual perspective, breaking down stereotype and judgment, and seeing a person as just that, a person, someone just like you and me. I'd like to share a selection of photographs and writings from my upcoming book, Hope Against Hope. I was lucky enough to meet up with Nina again while at Friendship Park. I talked with her about a year after this portrait was made. Nina, a 49-year-old Sacramento native and mother of 4, lives in a tent 1 block from Friendship Park. She's been living outside for about a year and a half now, and she talks with me about an armed robbery, the fiancé she lost, and getting her life back on track. After Nina graduated high school, she started working as a cashier. She found satisfaction in helping people and seeing the regulars in her store. Nina was head cashier at Pep Boys when her life changed forever. I was working on a Sunday when we got robbed during the 10 to 6 shift, Nina says. I had a gun shoved in my face, and he knew where the lockbox was and the layout of the store. It was horrifying. Everything in my life went downhill after that day. A few weeks after the robbery, my fiancé was hit by a car, Nina says. He had a titanium rod put in his leg, and within a year he was gone. He died in his sleep. His body rejected the titanium rod. As we walk, I can hear the determination in Nina's voice. It's been a rough journey. I'm trying to get out and off the street. I'm just taking it one day at a time, and that's how I deal with my sobriety, Nina says. Looking me in the eye, she continues, I haven't had a drink in 6 months, and that's number 1 with me, and I'm staying on the right track, and that will get me off the street. Cornelius and April live in an early model Cadillac on the streets of Sacramento. California natives, they met on the street 4 years ago. Sharing childhood memories and experiences brought them closer together. Their struggles are very similar to each other's. Cornelius and April both had to drop out of school to help take care of their families. Cornelius saw his mom was shot 6 times by his dad, so he really had it hard growing up and trying to go through school. His sister raised him, April says of Cornelius. I just wanted a job, Cornelius says. But my teachers would ask me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and when I'd tell them something, they'd say, no, well, you should just think along the lines of being the guy who comes in and picks up the trash off the floor. Cornelius tells me, I didn't know anything about racism until then. I knew the last week of the month we never had any food in my house. And I filled out a lot of job applications, but I never got a job. So I started hustling, doing all sorts of different types of things just to make ends meet, just to put food in the refrigerator at my house. And it was tough to get a legal job, Cornelius says. April tells me Cornelius spent most of his adult life, 30 years of it, in and out of the penitentiary system. April and Cornelius face each day with optimism and enjoy the simple things, like sharing candy they loved in their childhood. And they tell me that it's nice to know they have somewhere to go in the morning when they wake up, like Friendship Park. It's nice not being hungry and being able to do our laundry, and it's a safe place, and we can meditate there too, April says. Mark Ryan arrived in Sacramento in the 1980s and worked as an accounts receivable bank auditor for 14 years. He's 56 years old, college educated with a degree in business, and he loves studying languages. Mark has an uncanny ability to recall an incredible amount of factual information. During our interview, he recalled many interesting facts, and when writing up this story, I looked up all of them online, and he was spot on. Nothing he said was incorrect. Of his interests in languages, Mark says, I like Spanish and German the best, but we are lucky we speak English because English is twice as many words, and out of the 67 possible sounds, English has 44, so we are hardwired for those 44 sounds. Mark has been unsheltered, off and on, since 1999. Anthony and Michelle started their relationship a few years ago on the streets of Sacramento. Together they have helped each other overcome a drug addiction and agonizing ongoing circumstances. At the age of 4, Michelle was severely burned in a house fire started by her cousin who was playing with matches. She was burned over 80% of her body and was in a coma for a week due to smoke inhalation she sustained during the house fire. A doctor told her parents she might never walk again. A survivor of many thefts, Anthony explains that people continually steal Michelle's wheelchair. It's been stolen 7 times. Anthony explained that the thieves take the wheelchair to the recycling center and try to recycle it for cash. Based on all her ongoing medical conditions, a doctor recently told Michelle she had a short time left to live. Only God can tell me when I'm going to die, Michelle says softly. When I'm done making a portrait of each guest, I ask him or her to come over and take a look at the back of the camera. This way, the guests can see the portraits. I scroll through the images and we talk about each one and they decide which image they want to have printed. The guest always seems surprised that they look so good in their photographs. Unsheltered for almost 3 years, Sam hasn't had an hourly paying job since 2009. As we talk, Sam scans the room, puts his video poker game into his vest pocket and explains, I've worked all the temp agencies here in Sacramento and I worked for 12 years and I never got fired once. Every job I worked in Sacramento ended because it was temporary or seasonal or the company went bankrupt. Sam uses Loaves and Fishes and Friendship Park as a safe place to get coffee, food, hang out, and sleep during the day. He works or stays up at nights, and as Sam puts it, I sleep in the day and I'm awake at night. You couldn't sleep at night because there's always somebody bugging you or trying to rob you or trying to harass you. And on the weekends I go to Cesar Chavez Park. It's a pretty safe place. I photographed Herb during our first Father's Day session. I talked him into taking his shirt off for these photos. I like his tattoos and how they show a visual journey of his life. Herb didn't share his story with me that day, but we did talk briefly in the library parking lot after the photo session was over. We talked about music and the river and ghosts. I look for Herb each time I go to Friendship Park. Raymond was tiny when he was born. He was about the size of a human hand when his family took him home from the hospital. His mother devoted herself to his care, nursing him into a healthy toddler, and at some point she noticed while Ray was in his high chair he had stopped talking. Alarmed at Ray's silence, she immediately took him to the doctor. My mom picked me up and took me to the hospital and to the doctors, and they told her I'd never be able to hear again, and that I would not be okay. While speaking, Ray's hands animate the memory of the doctor's diagnosis he experienced as a toddler. But I am okay, he laughed. Ray was okay. There's no doubt about that. But he'd be hearing impaired for the rest of his life. Despite this setback, Ray went on to graduate high school and started working. I worked as a janitor in the Federal Building on Capitol Mall here in Sacramento, Ray says. Ray told me he retired from his state job after 25 years of service. And although Ray has a small pension, it's not enough to afford the high rent in Sacramento. A regular at Friendship Park since 2004, Ray says that he likes the coffee and the food and visiting his friends who he sees at the park every day. Ray continues as he smiles. I can wash my clothes here, and it's near my storage unit where I keep my bike and my cart and my other things. Ray currently lives in a tent on the American River. Although hearing impaired from a young age, Ray's wit, sense of humor, good nature, and stubbornness have helped him find his way through a world of sharp, harsh faces and muffled sounds. Bill grew up very poor in California. Without a lot of help or guidance from family, he dropped out of high school and started hanging around the streets of Stockton. Bill tells me he lived a wild, homeless, careless life until one day he woke up dead in a motel room. I woke up and my body was cold. I saw a bunch of people standing above me. I had overdosed on heroin and the EMTs gave me a shot of Narcan, he says. I felt so ashamed. I almost started crying. I held back because I was too ashamed to cry, and that shame turned me around and away from drugs, Bill says. Something was telling me change, 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 so I went to groups like AA and NA, and I got some mental health help too, and I joined a health club. Going to the health club made my body strong and my heart strong and my mind strong, and it also made my spirit strong. Bill tells me he was in and out of a lot of jobs during his recovery as his whole habits died hard and faded away. But he never gave up and found working at the Masonic Temple as a groundskeeper a really good fit. They liked the way I worked and the way I kept things there, and it really got me out of the gutter, Bill says. I saved my money, and over the years I was able to buy a mobile home trailer over there near the river. Bill asked me to send his portrait to his former neighbor who moved to the Palm Desert. And that's what I did. Guests will sometimes ask me, and I offer to mail their portraits to family and friends. Bill retired from his job as a groundskeeper, and now he helps his neighbors in the mobile home park with their landscaping and other chores. Lucy sat down, bent her head toward the floor, and quickly snapped her head back up. Her hair dramatically rose and then fell around her shoulders. It framed her face, just like she was a model on set. I took a test shot. Beautiful, I said. As I checked the LCD screen on my camera, I started shooting quickly. And after making about 5 images, I asked, "Do you want to see your portraits?" Lucy made her way to the back of the camera, and I scrolled through the images. We stood together and looked at what we had just made. "You look great," I said. "I'll bring you a print next week." Lucy didn't have time to talk after our quick photo session. Lunch was wrapping up at Loaves and Fish's dining hall. I asked if we could meet up after lunch at Friendship Park, and she agreed. The sky darkened, and Bob and I broke down the equipment, the lighting gear, the backdrop, the C-stands. We packed it all up and in and carried the equipment out to the car. While packing the trunk of the car with the gear, the clouds opened up and began dumping down cold, heavy rain. I saw Lucy walk back into the library lobby near where we had just been photographing her. She grabbed a weekly newspaper from the stand. I met her at the door and asked about our scheduled talk, and she told me there was too much rain to talk today. Lucy quickly walked away, exiting down the stairs. She walked across the parking lot with the paper over her head, using it to shield the storm as it continued to rage. I'd been in and out of that rain for less than 5 minutes, and I was wet, cold, and freezing. I wonder how people who live outside keep going. Day in and day out, the people I meet at Loaves and Fishes continue to have the inner strength that keeps them moving forward. Andre is from my hometown in Colorado and has come in more than once to have his portrait made. Andre and I talk about home, about Colorado. We talk about the shared experiences we had and the feelings of our hometown. Our memories of Elitch Gardens Amusement Park and the giant wooden roller coaster, Mr. Twister. Riding it was a rite of passage for young men our age. I graduated from East High School. I grew up in Park Hill, Andre told me at one of our portrait visits. The big concrete gates to City Park, that was our backyard. Did I have a beautiful neighborhood in life? The golf course, the museum, the planetarium, the zoo. That was our backyard, and I have memories and dreams of the house I grew up in. Those are beautiful, beautiful times, Andre says. The last time I photographed Andre, he yelled from the library door into the library where I was shooting, "To be or not to be?" "I came here to get a book," he said. "I didn't even know you were here." We shake hands and embrace. "Did you get a new tattoo?" I said. "This one's for my kids," he said. He walks over and sits down under the umbrella, turning away from the light. He pulls his t-shirt collar downward, exposing the freshly inked neck, and says, "Winners never quit." Andre and I found common ground from our childhoods, of the experiences growing up in the paradise of Denver, Colorado. It's moments like these when I find someone from this time and place, from Denver, that I miss my home. It makes me wonder what really makes a home. It makes me think of family and friends and the collective memories of everyone that has come and gone before me. Darren is a 22-year-old part-time college student and father of two. He's been living outside for about a year. He is trying to make his way back to campus and see his son and daughter regularly. Darren stays at the Wind Center currently, but says he can only stay there a maximum of 30 days, and then they kick him out. Wind Youth Services provides supportive services and opportunities to youth experiencing homelessness as they pursue a self-determined life and stability and independence. I've been living outside a while now, and I have family in town too, but everybody's caught up doing their own things, Darren says. I went to American River College and I got 3 certificates, one in building infrastructure and one in green technology, and I have 19 units in different classes, and 8 of the 19 are in the Stripe program. Darren tells me his short-term goal is to get a car so he can make his way back to school and see his children regularly. When I asked Darren what he had to overcome today to get to Friendship Park, he sits and looks at me silently and doesn't say a word. Moments pass, and he breaks his silence. He speaks softly, and at the level of a whisper he says, "A lot of things. I had to overcome a lot of things to get here today." A slim, girlish figure cautiously steps towards me. I shake her hand, look her in the eye, and direct her to sit down in the blue and white metal chair. I walk behind the camera and steady my gaze. She sits down slowly, turns her body counterclockwise towards the camera, lowers her head, and looks sideways into the lens. At that moment, I take the shot. I look at the back of the camera and zoom in to check focus and the light pattern falling on her face. "My name is Teresa," she says. Teresa speaks in a low, raspy voice and tells me how she likes reading, writing, and photography. She likes to read science books, particularly medical books, and tells me about the leveling and mapping system she is currently interested in. It's called hierarchical pattern mapping. I've been out here about a year. I was living in a house and there was violence and a criminal case, and we couldn't go back there, Teresa says. I own the house too. It's in Oak Park, but I can't go back. I studied the image that we had just made on the back of the camera, and to me, Teresa looks like a young woman ready for school, not a 55-year-old mother of 5 living alone in a tent on Ahern Street. In this way, she is very similar to the many people I meet at Loaves and Fishes. Teresa stands up slowly as our conversation winds down. "I have to do something else. I can't be outside anymore," she says. She pauses and tells me, "These are all the seconds of my life." Gloria says she first tried crystal meth at a party with her friends in Tulare County over 25 years ago. She used the meth daily after that, in part to help numb the layers of pain, grief, and trauma of sexual abuse she survived as a child. A 54-year-old mother of 2, Gloria tells me an overdose and failed suicide attempt pushed her in the direction of a recovery program that rescued her from over 2 decades of addiction. I saw myself floating over my body, and I saw myself ask my boyfriend for help. But he had his headphones on and couldn't hear me, so I asked God to help me, and that's when I woke up on the couch. Gloria found herself at Sutter Hospital battling pneumonia and having to answer some very tough questions by the staff like, "Did you try to hurt yourself?" When Gloria answered courageously and honestly, "Yes, I tried to hurt myself," The staff at Sutter helped her get to Turning Point Crisis Residential Center, where they guide guests like Gloria into transitional housing and addiction recovery programs. From there, Gloria was accepted into Sister Nora's house, which is where she currently lives. I've been off meth for 5 years now, and I haven't had a drink in over 26 years. I'm super clean, and I go to NA and AA, and I try to keep myself positive every day. I refuse to lose anything anymore. I've got to stand up for me because that's all I have, she says. Gloria wears a small, delicate Wonder Woman necklace, and when she talks about what that means to her, she smiles and says, "Stand up for yourself and be strong. Don't be afraid to say no, and always be who you are supposed to be." Anthony's life began in Rain, Louisiana on the second Wednesday of October 1955. Anthony talks to me in jagged, broken sentences as we walk through Friendship Park. He says it's tough navigating the night, avoiding the cops, and the looming possibility of county jail lockup, all the while dodging the ghosts that haunt him. Living out here is my own Vietnam War, Anthony says. Anthony tells me he got lucky, and now he lives in a small room at a boarding house near Loaves and Fishes. Anthony shows me his SEP statement, and I can see that 85% of his monthly assistance goes to pay for a tiny room off Del Paso Boulevard. If you stand under the blue sky, you can be in the same problem I'm in, no matter what it is, Anthony says. Many of the guests I photographed share their experiences of love, hope, and sadness, but I see them smile too. I see guests, despite their circumstances, laugh and joke, play dominoes, chess, and bingo. I see guests sing and dance. I witness many people succeed and overcome their addictions and find a permanent place to live indoors after years of living outside. My purpose with Hope Against Hope is to initiate and inspire a shift in community thought, increase understanding, raise awareness, and promote dignity of the unsheltered through the honesty of the photographic image. I hope I've accomplished this with some of you here today. Thank you so much.